outside the shores of Nigeria, where Hamas says the leader of its Lebanese group Hezbollah has been killed by Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon. Separately, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine militant group says 3 of its leaders were killed in a strike on central Beirut. Israel has not commented on the Beirut incident. If confirmed, it will be the first Israeli strike on Beirut beyond Hezbollah's base in the southern suburbs. This comes a day after Israel carried out large-scale airstrikes on Yemen, targeting what it calls military targets of the Houthi terrorist regime. In Lebanon, officials say 105 people were killed in strikes on Sunday, while the Prime Minister says up to 1 million people may now be displaced. Meanwhile, back home in Nigeria, security has been beefed up at the government house in the government reservation area of Benin, Edo State, over the likelihood of reinstating the Deputy Governor, Comrade Philip Shaibu, to resume office today. Many security operatives, including policemen, Department of State Services, DSS officials, and men of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps and SCDC, amongst others, are on standby with many armored personnel carriers to prevent the breakdown of law and order. They prevented vehicles into the government house from the first gate, with staff, journalists, visitors and others politely asked to trek, leaving their cars behind. Obasanjo's media aides has alleged that the planned invasion by Shaibu was to enforce his reinstatement, despite the fact that a stay of execution appeal had been filed challenging Justice James Omotosho's judgment. In a recent development, while the federal government is planning a subtle Independence Day anniversary celebration, the hashtag Fearless in October protest organizers have also concluded plans to stage protests across the country. You will recall that the federal government had last week announced that the October 1 Independence Day would be on a low-key basis due to the mood of the nation. Secretary to the government of the Federation, Senator George Yakubu, told journalists that President Tinubu's government was aware of and sympathize with all Nigerians over the economic conditions they're experiencing, hence the reason for a low-key celebration. However, some activists clamoring to end bad governance in Nigeria see the event as a fertile ground to continue their protests against the high cost of living and other lingering challenges bedeviling the nation. In a recent development, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, a non-profit organization based in Lagos, has urged Professor Mahmood, Yakubu, chairman of the Independent National Electoral Committee, effectively enforce the judgment, ordering INEC to pursue cases of bribery against state governors and their deputies and other electoral offences committed during the 2023 general elections. The judgment was delivered on July 18, 2024 by Justice Obiora Atuegu Egwato, following a mandamus lawsuit brought by SERAP. In the letter dated September 28 and signed by SERAP Deputy Director Kalawole Oluwadari, the organization said it is unacceptable for INEC to take the court, which is the guardian of justice in the country, for a ride. SERAP is concerned that the continuing failure by INEC to obey the court judgment is contributing to electoral offences in several states, as illustrated by the recently held governorship election in Edo State and impunity for electoral offences in Nigeria. Obeying the court judgment, according to SERAP, would go a long way in protecting the integrity of Nigeria's electoral and legal system. In a recent development, the World Bank has approved 3 operations for a total of $1.57 billion to support the federal government in strengthening human capital through better health for women, children and adolescents, and building resilience to the effects of climate change, such as floods and drought, through improving dam safety and irrigation. A statement released today explained that the financing package includes $500 million to address governance issues affecting education and healthcare delivery, $570 million for the primary healthcare provision strengthening program, and $500 million for the Sustainable Power and Irrigation for Nigeria project SPIN. The approval was made on September 26, 2024. A prominent member of the All Progressives Congress APC in Ondo State, Bogi Emmanuel, has officially resigned from the party. Emmanuel submitted his resignation letter during the weekend, articulating his discontent with the ruling party under President Bola Tinubu. He described the APC as a weapon of poverty, criticizing its governance for exacerbating the economic challenges faced by Nigerians. You're listening to the World News at 12 right here on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. We'll take a very short break and return with the news analysis segment. To stay with us. Welcome back. You're still listening to the news at 12 right here on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. We'll now head into the news analysis segment, and for that I have journalist and political, social and national affairs analyst, Mr. Chukwuma Okoro. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Chukwuma. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. So I want us to begin with Nnamdi Kanu's issue. His lawyer is alleging that the DSS is isolating him from his lawyers. They're not allowing him to talk to his lawyers. They're not allowing him to prepare his defense correctly. And before we proceed, I would actually like to let's take a listen to this insert so we know where we're coming from.
We were not provided a clean room where no one will have listening devices to listen to our conversations. And our documents, legal documents we take to the DSS facility, detention facility, are interdicted and seized and taken to places, photocopies and whatnot. Even anybody who is not a lawyer knows that a client, especially a defendant who is facing the death penalty, deserves to have some private time with his lawyers in terms of preparing for his defense. It's not everything we discuss that is critical to his defense that the prosecution is supposed to know in advance. But this is exactly what was happening in this matter. And then secondly, we do have 3 appeals. One goes to restoring his bail, which the Supreme Court severely criticized revocation of his bail by this High Court. And the other 2 go to the jurisdiction of the High Court to try him for these offenses. So what is really the essence of rushing to trial when you have these 2 situations militating against such trial? So we took that position and we tried to relay it to the Honorable Court, but the Court was insisting in the face of all this, especially the injustice of not allowing him his constitutional right to fair hearing. The Court was insisting on proceeding to trial. That left our client with no choice than to express his loss of confidence in the impartiality of the court. That's what.
You've taken a listen to Aloy Ejimako, that is Nnamdi Kanu's lawyer, and he's talking about the fact that the DSS is more or less isolating his client. They're not allowing them prepare for a proper defense before they go to trial. And he's also saying that's part of the reasons why Nnamdi Kanu was saying, you know what, you need to recuse yourself from this case. The question is it right for the court or for the DSS to actually isolate him from his lawyers?
Choma, the point of it is that I'm not a lawyer, but as a layman, I also understand some basic rudiments of the law. And if you look at what the DSS is doing, they have already pronounced Nnamdi Kanu guilty, before the final judgment is given. I mean, how will you take away somebody's liberty to have access, to his lawyers? Why would you do a thing like that? So apparently, what the DSS and what the courts are doing is to put stumbling blocks, towards fair hearing. In the case of Nnamdi Kanu, they are not giving him fair hearing. Look at the lawyer cried out. I mean, if somebody is going to appear before a court, isn't it proper that you give him access to his lawyers so that he can prepare his case and his defense before the court? The DSS is not allowing that. And Choma, the fundamental question to ask would be, why is Nnamdi Kanu in the custody of the DSS? Why shouldn't he be put in a correctional facility? Like we used to have prisons. Why is he not in the correctional facility so that he goes through the basic processes of, having visitors, having his lawyers, having his medical doctor, having family and relations visit him. The last time he also cried out that he is isolated in one corner of the DSS dungeon. Is that what should happen in a democratic setting? The answer is clearly no. So Nnamdi's lawyer, Aloy Ejimako, is not. You don't need to travel far to say that. Look, the government is actually putting stumbling blocks, to fair hearing, and it's on the basis of that the young man said, "Look, this court and the judge, I don't have faith, that you are going to get justice. That justice will be served in this court the way things are going." And probably that's why he asked the judge to recuse herself from the case. And gratefully, the judge did that, and we are waiting for the case to be assigned to another lawyer. So clearly, what Aloy Ejimako is saying is true. And I keep asking, why isn't Nnamdi in the DSS custody? Why not in a correctional facility? Nobody, even lawyers, have not been able to answer that question. So it clearly shows that, look, the government is interested in this case. Otherwise, they will just allow a free process of the law to take place, if you ask me.
Now, just Aloy Jumako is saying just on Friday here, we know that he told the judge to recuse herself. I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday. And then on Friday, they wanted to meet with their client, but the DSS will not allow them, which is in violation of court orders and also in violation of the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria as amended. Now, in a statement signed on behalf of the legal team, Ejimako said that yes, in these violations, that 4 of his lawyers came into DSS premises to meet with him to discuss what happened in court on the 24th and the way forward on his case, but they were not allowed in by the DSS. Yes, we've established that he shouldn't even be in the DSS custody in the first place. But who is going to speak up for him now that he's not even being allowed to meet up with his lawyers? Would the federal government rather appoint their own lawyers for him?
Chama, it's not in my place to answer that question. It's the place of, I think we should be asking the federal government, now that you have created a barrier between the young man and his lawyer, what else do you want him to say? What else do you want him to do? So that is why I said in my opening speech, in my opening statement, that looks like the government has already found Nnamdi Kanu guilty, short of sentencing him, if they are creating barriers between him and his lawyer. So they should also tell us, if you don't want him to see his lawyer, do you want him to represent himself in court? So already you are creating, there is no ground for him to defend himself. You have created barriers for him. He can't see his lawyer. He can't even see his medical doctor, as I told you. And the thing is telling on his health. The thing is telling on everything that surrounds him. And I keep going back to this question. Why is he in DSS custody? That is the question we should be asking the federal government. And we need answers for that.
All right. From DSS and Nnamdi Kanu, we move on to the case of INEC, and this is INEC versus SERAP, one could say, or INEC versus Nigerians through SERAP. Now, SERAP is saying, right, that they are not happy about the fact that the INEC is not obeying court's judgment. And if INEC will not obey this court judgment, then they should get ready to face charges over contempt of court. Now, what this court order, what INEC is saying is that it is unacceptable for INEC to take the court, which is the guardian of justice in the country, for a ride. Now, that's not just the case. What did INEC actually ask? What did the court actually ask INEC to do? The court ordered INEC to make sure it pursues cases of bribery against state governors and their deputies, and also against INEC officials who were involved in electoral malpractices and offences that were committed during the 2023 general elections. Now, while that is going on, the Edo elections also came into focus. Why are we as nine? In fact, it's not even just because I feel like not just I feel like we've seen an ordinary Nigerian cannot get away with contempt of court. But you see the political elites, you see this with security agencies like the DSS, like the police, and we also have INEC now. Why is it that they can get away with this kind of issues? Because we've not seen any INEC official that has been prosecuted. Even Hudu Yunusa Ari, the one that announced election results in Adamawa State before the end of collation, we've not seen that prosecution to the fullest extent of the law. Why exactly is INEC taking a backseat when it's supposed to show that transparency by prosecuting its officials who were involved in electoral malpractices?
Chama, the point of it is this. You know, SERAP has been very active as a civil society organization. They have done a lot of good work in that space, if you ask me. You know, they have taken government to court on several occasions and won judgment. But the problem is how this judgment is executed. But in this case, I have some concerns. One, the particular case in point is that SERAP is asking INEC, you know, to investigate governors and their deputies who were involved in election malpractices, vote buying, and electoral
malpractice.
I had used the word malpractice before, so I was looking for an alternative to use. But the fact of it is this: does SERAP expect INEC to investigate the governors? To what end? And their deputies? Because
if they can investigate the governors and their deputies, why not? At least they can investigate their own officials.
INEC cannot investigate itself. What SERAP needs to do is to ask the police and EFCC to investigate and take EFCC and take INEC officials to court. You cannot be a judge in your own case. Look, Choma, let's look at it like this. INEC conducts an election, and it is established that there was vote buying, and the governors and their deputies are involved. Now, you can investigate those people, but you cannot prosecute them because they have immunity. Let's keep that aside. Now, the other issue is that there are INEC officials who are involved in electoral malpractices. Do you, in all honesty, think that INEC will surrender its own to investigation and prosecution? The point is this: if these cases have been established, we expect the police to investigate INEC officials, take them to court, prosecute them, and then get justice for the people. I don't know if you share my argument. Why is SERAP asking INEC to investigate itself? Because on one hand, you can investigate, but you cannot prosecute the governors. So the larger picture of it is this: the police should be up and doing. If it's been established that certain INEC officials have compromised during elections, the appropriate thing to do is for the police to take them to court, investigate them, take them to court, and prosecute them. Honestly, I don't expect that INEC will investigate and prosecute itself. That's the work of the police. But at least
it can shine the light on those of its officials in order to assert its independence and show that it is transparent.
No. That doesn't amount to independence. The independence is in the conduct of elections.
What about transparency?
The transparent aspect of it is in the conduct of elections.
For them to at least show us that they pick the right people to conduct this. Inflation of results at collation centers. Intimidation of voters at polling units.
If police does intimidation of voters in polling units, by who? By INEC? Or by political parties?
By political parties.
Then we should be asking the police.
The ones that INEC officials are involved in inflation of results.
If there are INEC officials involved in inflating of results, the appropriate thing to do is to submit. The civil society organization has already said, look, this election was not free and fair. Based on that, you can take that as a petition, give it to the police. The police will now investigate and prosecute INEC officials.
You are saying that SERAP should have actually pointed out those officials, point them in the direction of the police so that the police can take it up from them. Because you don't expect INEC to prosecute itself.
They will never do that. They will never. That is not their job. Their job is to conduct free and transparent, credible elections. So if we are talking of investigating and prosecution, it should be that's the call of the police.
Are you saying it's not part of their job to make sure that the elections go in the best way possible without all of this malfeasance?
If the police conducts investigations, finds an INEC official guilty and takes the person to court, when the case is dispensed with in the court, it is now left for INEC to say, young man, when you were in our office, you compromised yourself, you compromised your duty. As a result of that, we are going to relieve you of your duty. They can sack the person based on that. But you don't expect INEC to pick their own staff, prosecute them, and then for how would they do that?
Not even in the interest of transparency, like I've been pointing out.
The transparency is, if you notice that there is no transparency in the conduct of elections, you now take it to the police. The police will do the investigation. Choma, is it the work?
$570 million for primary healthcare prevention, $500 million for sustainable power and irrigation for Nigeria. So this is addressing education and sustainable power and irrigation for Nigeria. So this is addressing education and healthcare and power for the country with $1.57 billion. Between June 2023 and June 2024, Nigeria has sought and borrowed about $4.95 billion from the World Bank within June 2023 to June 2024. Now, this is to address healthcare, right? This is to address education. But in many areas where education is not actually going as it should be due to insecurity and other factors, we have seen so many pictures of classrooms that are beyond dilapidated. So many pictures and videos of classrooms in several different regions of the country that do not have basic amenities. So many different pictures and videos of classrooms where the roof is bad. The people, they don't have chairs and tables. Pupils don't have chairs and tables to use to sit. Now, just last week, a Nigerian citizen who is based abroad, is a teacher in China, used 4.1 million naira to renovate one classroom in a northern school here in Nigeria. But we've had cases where you've seen northern governors saying, oh, want to spend so billion naira on rehabilitation of this and that. Now, while we're talking about that, an APC chieftain in Edo State says it can no longer move with the ruling party because it is now a weapon of poverty against Nigerians. Would you say that this person is right, seeing as we keep borrowing and borrowing, and it seems we can't even see the effect of all these borrowings from the World Bank? If you add this to the 4.95 billion that was borrowed before, you know how much Nigeria has borrowed from the World Bank in less than 2 years.
Choma, I don't have a problem with the government trying to fix healthcare and education. But what I have concern is, why will you borrow money? Why will you borrow $1.7 billion, to fund healthcare and education in Nigeria, when that is clearly not the direct productive sector? This is not a grant, it's a loan, it will be paid back. So why don't you invest it in productive sector so that you'll be able to pay back? Or do you want to take the money so that by the 80th edition of UNGA, you go and ask creditor nations, you go and ask World Bank, you go and ask the London Club and the Paris Club to grant you debt forgiveness? I don't know if you get my point.
And while we're seeking debt forgiveness, we're still borrowing more.
You are still borrowing more. But to what end? My concern is, if you borrow 1.7 billion naira, can't you put it in productive sector where some kind of investment, where you'll invest it, so that when you are paying the interest, you are also paying the principal. It will get to a point where you have break-even points, you have even return on investment, so that you are able to repay the loan.
Mr. Okoro, at what point actually can we have institutions that hold the federal government to account to make sure that at least these loans that are being borrowed for whatever reason are channeled into the industries and the sectors for which they are borrowed?
Choma, it is this point that you and I are having this discussion. The point is now, the time is now. Because if you keep speaking the English, speaking the grammar, holding this conversation from now till end of the year, end of month, and there are no institutions to check this, I think we'll simply be going back to borrow again and again. Choma, can you imagine that we had a debt cancellation about 20 years ago of $30 billion? And now how much do we have again in our debt kitty?
This is not to even talk about the ones that we are owing China.
The ones that we are owing. The Guardian newspaper this morning reeled out, loans that were used, that crude oil was used to collateralize in Nigeria. So when we even do the 1.6 million barrels per day, we don't even have up to 450 coming to us.
Because of loan for crude.
Because of loan for crude. Some of $2 billion, some of $3 billion, some of 550 billion naira, and all of that.
Is that to say, like, this chieftain of the party that has left now is saying that the APC is a weapon of poverty against Nigerians?
Well, you don't need to travel far to see that.
Mr. Okoro, as much as I want to continue this conversation, we need to step out of the studio at this moment. I must thank you for joining me on the World News at 12 this afternoon. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. You've been listening to the World News at 12 right here on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. Just before we wrap up, let's take a look at the top stories again. You heard that the Hamas leader has been killed in Israeli strike on Lebanon. Heavy security in Edo government house over likelihood of Shaibu's resumption. Federal government plans Soto Independence Day celebration as Nigerians protest against hunger. SERAP asks INEC to obey court judgment or face a contempt charge, and World Bank approves a fresh $1.57 billion loan for Nigeria. That is a wrap on the World News at 12. My name is Chioma Innocent. Good afternoon, and thank you for listening. Do stay tuned. The area matter comes up shortly with a larger action.